Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to New York Times technology columnist J.D. Biersdorfer, who just published the sixth edition of her how-to book, iPad, The Missing Manual. Stick around, because just when you think you've mastered the tablet, there's always somebody who can teach you something new, like J.D. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview, brought to you by Amazon.com, Audible.com, and 1-800-DIAL-DJs. Please stop by the website, MrMedia.com, click on our advertisers, support the show. And remember, there's more than 1,000 interviews available at MrMedia.com. We've been doing this since February 2007. Hope you'll find something you like. And thanks for listening. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience that includes my own mother, who, even though she lost no time opening the iPad she received on her 75th birthday and figuring out how to use it unassisted, is always looking for a quicker route to ordering stuff from the Home Shopping Network in the new media capital of the world and worldwide headquarters of the Home Shopping Network, St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm an Apple guy. All the way back to the Apple IIc computer back in, I don't know, 83, 84. I've been as brand loyal as it gets. And I wrote this on a desktop iMac. Behind me is an iMac Pro. I'm sorry, a MacBook Pro. And charging next to it is an iPhone. But I've never made the move personally to the iPad. My wife has one. She never goes anywhere without it. My daughter has one. Her high school mandated their use this year, and I approved of the way it took 30 pounds of books and supplies off her back. And we bought my mother one for her 75th birthday this past year, and she can't imagine how she ever got along without it. Me, I never got the fever for it. Still, I know how popular the iPad is, and I admire its utility. That's why I asked New York Times technology columnist J.D. Biersdorfer to come on the show today and talk about her book, iPad, The Missing Manual, now in its sixth edition from O'Reilly. Because no matter how smart you are and how many great tricks and shortcuts you know or great apps you've discovered, there's always someone like JD who can show you one more. JD Biersdorfer, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you very much for having me, Bob.
Glad to have you here. I got to point out, you're wrapped up tight there. You've got a coat on. You've got gloves on. You have no heat in your building at the moment, correct?
Yeah, it's a winter in New York City, and that means a lot of the boilers in these smaller buildings get together and plot to all break at once. I've had 3 friends who've had boilers go out in the past month. But yeah, mine went out Sunday. It's getting replaced. We may hear plumbers banging around in the background, but it's getting warmer. It's supposed to be up to 60 degrees this weekend here in New York, but my boiler happened to break when it was at 22.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you coming out for the interview nonetheless.
Yeah, and I'm jealous of you being in Florida, man.
Shh, no one's supposed to know in the middle of winter where I am. No. Yeah, it's a little warmer than 60 here. It's actually about 85.
Ah, okay, I'm gonna talk about that.
All right. So let's talk about iPad, the missing manual, and
Yeah,
uh, no pressure here at all. But
okay.
what's something you can tell folks about the iPad right off the bat that they probably don't know?
Well, there's so many things about it. Very easy to set up. With all the new models, you don't even need to connect it to a computer. You can just take it out of the box, set it up immediately, buy and download all the stuff, the music, the movies, the books that you want to use on it. Of course, there's apps. You can open Microsoft Word documents on it, which a lot of people didn't really think that you could do. Just a whole variety of stuff. For many people, it is a laptop replacement. Some people will sort of use it as just a second screen just maybe they want the real keyboard, and so they'll stick with a laptop, or they want programs that specifically need to run on either Mac, Windows, or Linux. But you can get by with a lot of stuff, and I've gone on trips and stuff where I've just taken the iPad and not really missed the laptop at all, especially the extra pounds.
And do you? I'm just curious now. If you just take the iPad, do you have an accessory keyboard, or do you use the keyboard right on the screen?
It depends on how much typing I actually have to do. You can buy external Bluetooth keyboards that'll work great with it. It's got a Bluetooth chip in it, so you can just pair up a Bluetooth keyboard and type like it's basically a laptop with a separate keyboard and a screen. They've a number of cases that will have a keyboard built in, so you not only get something to protect the cover of your iPad while you're traveling, you can flip it up, set it in this little stand, have some keys, and work there in the airport or the hotel room. A lot of options. And then if I'm just doing a quick email, quick note, the glass keyboard is perfectly fine for that, as long as it's not too many paragraphs of typing.
I think that's the thing that has kept me from getting too attached to my wife's or my daughter's iPad is just the typing on it. I've never spent enough time with it to get the flair for it, and I'm so used to at the very least having the laptop keyboard. But
Yeah, you don't get any tactile feedback. It's like, as I say in the book, I think at some point, it's like typing on a glass coffee table. And touch typists hate it because they can't feel where they're at. But if you just, if you're a hunter and a pecker like me, then
me
it's
too.
not bad.
I work the same way. So I want to ask you this. Now, I love the Missing Manual series in general, but there's now this is the sixth edition that you've produced. Pretty sure there haven't been 6 years of iPads yet. Are you putting them out like twice a year? How?
Yeah, a couple of years we did actually. The original iPad came out in 2010 in the spring there. I believe it was April the 3rd. And every time Apple either does a new hardware revision or they've updated the software, iOS 4.3, iOS 5, iOS 6, whatever, we go in and update the book so that people have the latest version with all the hardware and the software being explained at once, because you don't want to be out of sync. And for a while, Apple was doing two models a year. They were constantly updating the software, trying to get it just to that right place. So that's why we have six editions, and the iPad's only been out for I think 5 generations.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought there was more editions of the book than there were actual iPads or iPad
Yeah,
years. Is
yeah,
it?
no, kept me busy.
Do they? I've always wondered about this. Do you know? Are you able to work ahead well, for example, seven? I think 7.0 is the latest update of the software as we're the operating system as we're talking. Um, do you know ahead that that's coming, and do they work with you, or are you working independent of anything that Apple is doing to update the book?
Oh, we're completely unauthorized as far as Apple's concerned. I'm not in like a hardware preview program or anything. I can read release notes and stuff on the software and poke around with that a little bit. But remember this fall when everyone was saying, oh, what's the new iPad going to have? And people were speculating and rumors and all of that. I'm kind of right there with them because I don't know either. I'm not
Hmm.
privy to any of that information. And so when Apple drops the new device, because we have a very short window of time to get the book out to stores, I'm one of those people that's out in front of the Apple Store way early in the morning and just waiting to get it and hoping that I will get a hardware model so I can go through and test it and take all the screenshots and do all the things that we show in the book.
That's got to be a hell of a scramble because books generally have a bit of a lead time. It's not like your day job where you write it today. People are reading it tomorrow.
Yeah, books do have, there's a production process there. The printing process is much longer, especially when you're doing a color book. And then there's just the distribution factor, the binding, and then putting it on the trucks and getting it to the stores. So it is a kind of a mad dash. I basically lock myself in a room for 2 or 3 weeks and just have to crank it out. And there's a lot of a lack of sleep factor in there. But you get to know the product really well because you're basically chained to it. But it does happen all at once, and so you wait all year for it to happen, and then in this whirlwind of 4 to 5 weeks, it's over and gone, and then you're off to the shelves.
And what were for 7.0, which is where we're at now? What were the big changes that affected the book?
Well, the big book, it was all the whole new software interface where they completely Johnny Ive went and redesigned the look of the software itself. So pretty much every screenshot in the book I had to redo because it was so much different from iOS 6. That skeuomorphic, as they call it, old way where there were slight drop shadows and gradations, and things sort of looked like the calendar sort of looked like a calendar that you would have on your desk. And they went through and did this flat design where everything, no shadows and just plain colors, and some of it was a little bright. The font got different. A lot of people had a problem because the new font on the device was sort of hard to read. It was very thin. You had to get used to it. So a lot of new screenshots, just figuring out where they had moved stuff. They added a lot of nice features though in iOS 7. The control center, which lets you get to frequent settings with just a swipe up from the bottom. They made, they're doing much more with the iCloud integration, and now you've got iCloud on the web where you can do your documents and spreadsheets and presentations there, even right in your web browser, and have that bop around to any computer that you're using or any iOS device. So they had a lot of stuff under the hood. I think the visual change was the biggest for a lot of people. And every time Apple puts out a new operating system, they always tout that, oh, we've got 200 new features. And some of those are very minor, but some of them are very big. And, they've added all kinds of things like game controller support right in iOS 7. So now you can get a third-party game controller if you really like mobile gaming. Just a lot of new, really kind of fun things.
Does the iPad have this? What I think is the greatest feature of iOS 7 on my iPhone, the flashlight. Is that on the iPad?
I don't believe it is. It wasn't
Uh,
on the test model or the one that I bought because it goes with it's using the camera flash there, and the iPad camera does not have the flash built in yet.
ah,
Didn't get the fingerprint either. Which, if you bought a new iPhone 5S, I think you got that touch print ID thing, and which a lot of people thought were going to be in this new piece of iPad hardware, and was not.
I think that the flashlight is the best improvement on the software that I've seen. And I know that there were apps I think years ago that could do that, but not as effectively. But this is, for me, that's my favorite. It's the stupidest thing, but I'll give you an example of how useful it is. I coach girls soccer, and we got to the end of a game the other night. It was dark, and it turned out one of my parents had lost his car keys in the field where we played, and so he, his ex-wife, myself, his daughter were out there with their iPhones using the flashlight in the dark looking for the key.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a very simple little thing, and you're right. There used to be apps that could do it, but just being able to get to it with two swipes on your phone, it makes all the difference in the world. I love the flashlight as well.
Yeah. Now the idea of the missing manual series is that there are some things that the manufacturer didn't tell the consumer. And Apple, of course, has always, not always, but for many years, has kind of eschewed manuals for a long time on the conceit, which I think is true, that its products are generally so intuitive to use that anyone can figure it out. My mother did. If my mother, who'd never had an Apple product, opened the iPad and got right to it, and I was astonished. But what are some of the key things that an Apple user, an iPad user, needs a manual like the missing manual to learn?
Pretty much just the stuff beyond the basics. I get letters from people who said, "Oh, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know you can make the font bold," because they don't really go into a lot of detail. And Apple will put out a little PDF that you can download with any of their products, and they've got a website that has some support things. But if you read them, it's very basic, straightforward information. Maybe one or two lines about, "Oh, this is how you sync a photo, and this is what you do to do this." And it gets you kind of pointed in the right direction, but it doesn't really go in depth like we like to do in the missing manuals. And this is across all the missing manuals, which David Pogue created the series. And he wanted to have books that would tell you, well, why would you want to do something? Did you know you could do this? Here are the 5 steps to do this thing that Apple will just give you in like one phrase and say, oh, yeah, you can do that. And then missing manuals, we like to break that down like a recipe, like do this, then do this, then do that, and just walk people through, especially people who know Apple products are supposed to be easy and intuitive, but maybe something's just not clear and they get very frustrated, and you point them in the right direction and tell them this is how you do it and this is why you would want to do it, and maybe then they can go on and maybe apply those principles as they wander around the device and find other things. So we like to do that. We like to do tips of things maybe you didn't know that it could do this. We talk about the accessories, third-party accessories that you can get for it that make using it easier, like keyboards and headphones and gamepad controllers. which they don't really go into a lot of detail unless it's an Apple branded product. So we like to just bring the whole universe of the device in one book, so you can go pretty much from basic setup to more complicated things like, hey, I want to do a keynote presentation and make my own slides and build transitions, and then I want to share this with people who use PowerPoint. We actually talk about that in the book. There's an overview of all of the iWork apps. We'll talk about syncing all your media, maybe getting free ebooks that you didn't know you could get from around the web, how you can use Amazon and Nook books through the apps on your iPad to read Kindle books, even though you don't have a Kindle. Just a lot of stuff that Apple will not really go into in full detail because that's not in their best interest. They just want to get people up and running with the device, give them, and their tech support has gotten better. And if you go on their support site, you can find some nice videos and things that explain. But we wanted to do a book where you just got everything right there and you can pick it up, refer to it anytime you have a question.
What's the nicest compliment you've ever gotten on the book relative to what you've written or produced?
I have to think back because I've been doing this book since 2010, and I did 11 editions of the iPod book, so sometimes I get them confused. But I think a lot of it is I got this book from my mom, and she really liked it, and it helped her. You know, it's the ones where someone has given the book as a gift, and they will take the time to write, even if they didn't use the book themselves.
Hmm.
I gave this to a relative, and it helped them,
Sorry.
and it made them really happy that they had it. So that's kind of nice because you're sort of sharing the knowledge that way.
Have you, for example, when you got the iOS 7, you got the latest uh, iPad, what have you found things that it can do that perhaps may have surprised someone at Apple? Where, it's like when you're given the tool, then a lot of the creativity comes after the tool is created. Uh,
Yeah,
I can fix anything with a hammer, and I don't think that the person who created the hammer probably intended it to be used quite the way I might use it. Same thing with an iPad, I would think.
yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of things that Apple, knows it can do that maybe they just didn't publicize. And we try to find things that are just very basic, that you didn't know that was in there. We found some bugs and things that I've written about that I've noticed has gotten fixed in later versions of the software. And I was joking with the books, the guy who did the original missing manual interior design that we use orange circles in ours to sort of highlight parts of the screen or buttons that you need to push. And the orange is a really nice contrasting color to use when you're going against the background of the iPad. And we looked over on Apple's website, and all of a sudden they're using orange circles. So we thought that was similar.
That's
Uh,
nice.
yeah, it could have been completely coincidental, but I'm like, oh, that looks strangely familiar. And I don't know how closely they read, if they read the book at all. Because they I guess probably have other things to do there in Cupertino. But we and if there's anything that's ever let me back that up. You can edit this part out, right? My train of thought just like went off the track.
That's all right.
Yes, so I don't know how closely Apple reads it, and I've never gotten any letters from them saying, "Oh, this is completely bogus," or "You shouldn't do that." They're a company that they're going to do what they're going to do, and they just go on, and whatever you do, is as long as you're not doing anything litigious, they don't care.
One of the interesting tips that I saw in there, I'm familiar with the Opera browser. It's been around for a couple of years, but I liked the explanation that you gave for why it might be good to use on the iPad. I think you said that the Opera servers compress things that go out, so that when if you've got limited data that because of your phone plan, you'll use less using the Opera browser.
Yeah, they do. They actually thought about it, and I believe Opera has released a new version of their Coast browser just within the past week or so. That's actually changing the way you interact with it as well. I mean, I love Opera. I believe it's a Norwegian company, but they've always been very progressive with their browser design, both on the desktop and on their mobile. And I believe their new version, the Coast one, sort of gets rid of the sort of kind of tappy button thing, and you can do a lot of your navigation with gestures and swipes. Now, I've downloaded, I haven't had a chance to play with it, but I like the fact that people are looking at tablets as this is a different kind of device than a laptop. You've got a keyboard and you've got a mouse, and you can click and do that on a laptop. A tablet, you have a much different interface and many more possibilities of ways to interact with that, and they're actually playing to that and making it more natural to use. You've got a flat slab, and I can wave my hands and swipe and do stuff, and it'll react instead of me having to find the one little button somewhere on the page and tap that to simulate a click.
It's the kind of thing that until it exists and it gets used by a lot of people, who knows? You have to have it out there in the population to see how it gets used, and then it kind of takes on a life of its own, as I'm sure the computers did before it, and the iPhones and everything else.
Yeah, yeah. You plant the seed, and then people will figure out new ways to do things. And I think that's probably true of the iPad itself. I don't know how far Apple had thought that people would do these things. Take the device to heart, and you see people writing all kinds of really inventive apps and just things like Evernote, where you can basically store your brain, on a cloud server and have a access to it on the iPad. You can get to it from your computer. It's on the web. They really just kind of turned it loose in the wild and let people do what they wanted with it. And it's really great to see what people come up with. I was at Comic-Con. I was moderating a panel this October here in New York, and I saw a bunch of kids. There were the cosplay kids running around superhero outfits, but a lot of them had iPads, and they were just actually using it as a camera, taking pictures of things on the show floor, and then they would go and they would blog and post things and use the photos that they just taken, and it become this sort of go-to device. And they weren't using their phones. I noticed it had, there was a number of iPads that were actually out there on the floor, and I think it was a bigger device to use. You had more control over it. You could see what you were doing better,
Hmm.
and they were just really having a blast with it.
My mom had she'd always had an ancient PC, and we bought her this webcam to go with it, and it was always a disaster to use it. It was just always a mess. And so when she got the iPad with the video, I was very hesitant to use it because she had had such bad experiences, with the webcam. And now
Yeah.
she's just she knows to hold it up, and she knows to get her image right, and she can share, and she can show around the room, and I think it's a remarkable thing. What
Yeah, and that's one of Apple's hallmarks too, is the integration of hardware and software, where you don't have to think about it. You don't have to figure out where the point of failure is because it's so tightly integrated. And I think you're right. A lot of the early webcams were confusing, and maybe they didn't work right with this version of Windows, or there was some driver issue. And with the iPad, it's like turn it on, boom, and off you go.
Yeah, the poor PC people who switch to Mac products are always like, "What I don't understand, where's the C drive? Where's the C drive?" Who cares?
Yeah, different landscape.
So, do you use? Obviously, you do the book. Do you use an iPad daily? Do you interact with it a lot? And if so, what kind of things do you use it for that maybe you used to use something else for?
I use it every day. I've got a number of iPads because I, buy a mini and I buy the new model. I've got an Air that the one that just came out in October, and I use it for a number of things. A lot of times it's like you get up, morning coffee, browse the headlines, do a little surfing. I have the app from my cable company, so I'll program the DVR
Mm,
with the app for everything that I want to watch for the week. I can do some writing on it with the Pages suite. That's Apple's version of Microsoft Office, where you've got a word processor, spreadsheet, and a presentation software. Let's see. I will check Twitter, and all the social media is on there. It's very easy. I found that a lot of times when the iPad first came out, I noticed I was first using it as a surfing tool for when things like you don't want to squint at your smartphone at the end of the day, but you don't feel like booting up the laptop. The iPad sort of fit into that gap very nicely in the early days, and then as people have added more apps and more functionality and made it a much more useful device for business and entertainment, then it just starts to take over more of that, what you use a smartphone and what you use a laptop for. I watch movies on it when I'm traveling. I read ebooks. I'm actually reading an ebook on the history of Bletchley Park right now through the Kindle app. So it's kind of become the go-to device. I'll still use the laptop again if I have a lot of typing to do, or if there's something that just really needs a lot of horsepower or a program I don't have on the iPad. And now the iPhone's kind of gotten booted to the back of the line. That's the sort of thing. Well, if I'm just out running around, then I'll use that. But the iPad has sort of probably maybe taken up 75% of my screen time.
interesting. I want to ask you about the kind of apps that you use, but I'm gonna start off myself by saying that I think one of the great innovations. I don't know if it's an innovation, but one of the things that I've really liked using my iPhone for, and sometimes my wife's iPad, and I know she uses it for this a lot, is depending on your cable company, you can in your own home or your own environment where you have cable service, if you have Wi-Fi, a lot of the cable companies now let you watch any channel from your cable system on your iPhone or your iPad or even your laptop. I don't think I don't think that one's broken out as much. I mention that to people and they look at me like, "What? You can do what?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
if
think
you're
it depends on the cable provider. Yeah.
yeah, if you're sick, if you're homesick, as we've all probably been this winter or will be, and you're in bed, and maybe the TV is across the room, or you can't find the remote. If you download the app that your cable company has, if your cable company has this, you can watch. I know in our case, I think there's like 100, 200 channels, and I've been sick in bed, and I put in the earbuds, and I'll just watch, on either the iPad or the iPhone. I'll watch Top Gear on BBC America or the Cartoon Network or Showtime, HBO. That to me is worth the price of the device. That's I just want to say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. I've used it for that myself. I think I've watched a number of Doctor Who episodes because BBC was one of the ones that seemed to go along with
Right.
the cable companies that were allowing people to have the kind of TV everywhere. HBO's got an app. If you've got a subscription to HBO through your cable company, you can watch all your shows there. Netflix has become incredibly popular on all kind of mobile devices just because they're out there. I think you can get pretty much Netflix on everything except maybe your toaster now. But all of their streaming capability, they've got the shows, their original series, and if you're really hooked into the Apple universe and you've got an Apple TV and you want to share, you can easily pop it up to the big screen through the AirPlay technology that's built in there. But you're right, even just laying in bed on the couch, oh, I think I want to watch an old episode of Cheers or something, you just tap it up and you've got this little miniature second screen. And if you only have one TV in the family and somebody else wants to watch something and you lose that battle, you take your iPad and you go and you watch what you want in the other room and you've got your own private viewing booth.
And the screen resolution is extraordinary. So you're not going to do, you just hold it a little closer than being across the room.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
So tell us some apps that either you use or that you've discovered. Let's open up some eyes to people on some things that maybe they don't know about.
Okay, well let me go through my day. I like the AccuWeather app if I'm getting ready for work, want to see what the temperature's going to be. That
Outside
one's
or in your
great.
apartment?
Both.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But AccuWeather, and a lot of these will have the ads on them, but I work in Times Square, so I'm really good at tuning out advertising. So I'll do that, check the weather, see what's coming. They've got links to maps. The Weather Channel also has a very nice app if you like the Weather Channel, the way they handle the weather. Again, the DVR app, my cable company is Time Warner, so I'll program the DVR, maybe watch a little live TV. If I'm in the gaming mood, I was into Angry Birds for the first two editions of the book. It took me that long to get through the levels. But it's a really fun way to just kind of zone out. I like The Room. There's a game called The Room, which is a beautifully rendered sort of puzzle mystery thing with incredibly rich graphics. I believe it's a British piece of software because it won a BAFTA. So maybe I'll play around in that for a while. Again, doing some writing through the Pages app if I need to knock off a quick article or something or notes to myself. I can check my schedule. If you buy into the whole iCloud integration thing, you have your calendar and your contacts synced through all your devices, so I can see what I've got going for the day. I'm actually using a lot of photography stuff with it too. You can get a little adapter. I think it's about $40 that will connect a SD card to the bottom of the iPad, and then you pop your camera card in there. It will import all of your photos. You can pull them all in, and the iPad is a really great photo preview booth. So I'll go through and look at photos, and if I want to do some editing, the Photos app that comes with iOS 7 has a few basic things. It's got like 9 filters now you can do if you want to get all Instagrammy with it. You can crop, you can enhance photos if you want, you can take out red eye. If you want to do more, like mess around with exposure or do some really more kind of stronger edits to your photos, Apple has made iPhoto. That's one of the apps that they made free now. If you buy a new iOS 7 device, it's a very powerful photo editing program. Adobe has jumped in with Photoshop Touch if you're tied in with the Adobe Photoshop world. And you can do a lot of really nice edits, like lighten part of a photo, darken another part, change the exposure. A lot of really sophisticated stuff that, 10 years ago we had no idea we could do with just basic smartphone cameras. So I'll do a lot of photo stuff. You can upload photos directly from the device.
Hmm.
Hit all your social media. I think every social media site out there has an app now. Pinterest, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. And then at the end of the day, I'll download a movie, listen to some music. You can sit and stream radio either through iTunes Radio or Pandora, one of the many streaming services. Pop in your earbuds, put on some tunes, and maybe just sit there and catch up on your email for the day,
Hmm.
or see what headlines you missed. And then go to work. And if you are really tied to it, you can set the alarm to get up the next morning because it's got a clock in the latest version of the software. So
Hmm.
it can be kind of like a Swiss Army knife, almost. No matter what you want to use it for, you can probably find an app or some tool that will let you adapt the iPad for what you want to use it for.
I got a great line. There's an app for that. Never mind.
Yes, yeah. Who said that?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think. I'm going to add two apps to that list that I like, just for if people are interested in checking something else out. Stitcher, great
Uh-huh.
app if you like radio or TV.
Hmm.
It gives you an audio feed, both an audio feed from podcasts, but also from over-the-air radio, over-the-air television, and it's a you can just basically stitch together your own radio station, whatever you like to listen to in the order that you want to hear it. So there's that, and then along the radio line, there's one called Vintage Radio, which there's a free version which gives you a limited number of things like Jack Benny and
Ah,
Fibber McGee and Molly, Greg
mhm.
Gildersleeve, things like that.
Old time radio shows.
Exactly, old time radio shows. But for $2.99, you get something like 10,000 shows that you can download. So I like Jack Benny. I've been listening for months now. I'll fall asleep at night listening to an episode of Jack Benny. It started in 1934, I think, and I said to my wife the other day, I'm almost through World War II with Jack Benny,
Ah,
because
so you're marching along there.
yeah, it's amazing. We start the week before Pearl Harbor, and then
Hmm.
the week after, suddenly the tone changes, and he comes out at the beginning and says a few things very seriously, and then they go and do their show, and then for the next 4 years, he's at military bases. I'm getting off topic here, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's a great app that you wouldn't necessarily run across. So I
Yeah,
throw.
no, and that's the beauty of apps. It can bring parts of the world that you either forgot about or never knew, and it really is a tool for discovery, especially with all the great music discovery services out there. If you go to the Internet Archive, if you're a Grateful Dead fan, you can download live concerts. They've got free ebooks there too, tons of video that you can get, and you can do it all with these. And it's not just the iPad. Android tablets can go wander too, but I think all of these mobile devices and these apps that have come with them have really enriched the culture or brought a lot of it back for people who didn't have access to it before.
Hmm, I agree. All right, so let me broaden the conversation a little bit before we wrap up. Generally speaking, what's the biggest difference? And you can be pro or con on any way that is appropriate. But what's the biggest difference between, say, an iPad and other popular tablets, whether it's the Kindle Fire from Amazon, Surface from Microsoft, or the Galaxy tablet from Samsung? What separates them?
A lot of it has to do with ecosystem. If you buy an iPad, you're going to be hooked in largely to Apple's own iTunes and App Store world. So you get all your apps for that. They have to be written especially for iOS. If you buy a movie from them, it's got the copy restriction that is built in from Apple. So that's one thing. So you sort of decide, well, if you're looking, if you're all about stuff and like, where do I get like the best movies and the latest music? Maybe you're gonna look around and see which store has the largest amount of that or apps. And Apple is very big on their. I know they get knocked a little bit for like having a closed system. It's not as modifiable as Android. Can't get in there and hack it around without really damaging your device. Some people like the freedom. Some people, Android has a bigger malware problem because of that. Apple is very tightly closed with their system, and they don't want you messing around with it because they want to keep out a lot of the
Crap.
Spam, yeah, yeah, the garbage that can get in there, yes.
Yeah.
So, and there's been tons of reports of, like, I think at one point, one of the antivirus companies released a report where I think 93% or something, some huge number of mobile malware was all aimed at Android because they were finding little holes in the system that Apple didn't have, and Google, has many different versions of Android out there itself, and the wireless carriers and the hardware makers can also adapt it, and so there's probably 31 flavors of that thing out there that people can, find maybe little creases and holes to sneak into and do bad things. Whereas Apple tends to have a very high adoption rate unless your hardware is outdated. I know they threw the original iPad under the bus and are not updating that with the latest versions. But from the iPad 2 onward, you can get the new system. It may not run as fast as on the latest hardware, but you can download it and have all the newest features and the latest security stuff that's been built in. So that's one thing. People will look at software and security as sort of setting Apple apart. It really was, I think, the first tablet that really caught on. So they had maybe a little bit of a head start in apps. I had a flight last week on Delta, went into the terminal in LaGuardia, and they've got their whole Terminal D has these free iPads that you can play around with while you're waiting. They're a little
Hmm.
loaner model. Just see it sitting there at your desk. You can tap. You can order food at a diner there. I think they probably got in early because Apple was in the game early, and so all the big corporations who take a long time to make decisions about equipment purchases saw that this one was out first. It's been tested, huge adoption rate. People love it. It's a pretty even platform in terms of security and the version. So they're going to go with that, and it's sort of getting integrated into how they do, how they entertain people and keep people busy while they're waiting around for their delayed flights. So that was sort of interesting to me too. And I think that was pretty much just because Apple was there first. And Android, not want to knock Android. It's a wonderful system. I've got a Nexus 7 as well, and it's a beautiful piece of hardware. The screen is gorgeous. I tend to go back to the iPad just because I know it better. But Android's got some nice things, and if you're hooked into the whole Google universe, you've got a Gmail account and a Google Play account and Google Plus and all that, and you really like that, then maybe that's the better product for you because it is sort of keyed to all of those services.
Well, let me ask you this, and I know this is the big question. There's been plenty of magazine and newspaper stories about this, about what more can Apple produce? Where can they go from here? And it's whether it's the iPad or any of the other products. And I've tried to think about this before I was going to ask you. I mean, the things that struck me is I'd like to reach a point where my desktop and my laptop have touch screens the way the iPad and the iPhone are.
Um,
I feel like I've become so accustomed to being able to touch the screen and making things happen. I'd like to see that happen. And then the other thing is, I just think, well, I kind of no, I just went completely blank on what I was gonna say. The other thing is, and the only thing I don't think is, I don't think wearable computers are really a thing. I personally, I think that Apple put out a year or two ago that it was moving towards like an iWatch type of thing, mostly to force all of its competitors to go out and produce those as Samsung did. And
yeah,
I don't think they're going to ever do it at Apple. I think that you can see the Samsung product and go, yeah, I don't really think anybody needs that.
yeah, yeah. The wearable thing, I don't see them doing a lot of. I mean, we've seen the Dick Tracy watch, or whatever you want to call it, for a while, and back to like the Microsoft Spot watches that never caught on, and people have been trying it. And the Samsung Galaxy Gear, I think it got middling reviews. A lot of the knock on it was it didn't work with a lot of phones, so it was a very small audience for it. They're widening. Obviously, they've released Android updates for people who maybe have an older phone and still wanted to use the watch. Um, you see the Mavericks and iOS getting closer and closer visually. I hope if Apple does sort of combine the touch and the desktop interface, they do it much more seamlessly than what we saw with Windows 8, which got a lot of blowback for being kind of a hybrid Franken system. Like you never knew. You click on a file on the desktop and all of a sudden it's thrown you into the modern interface or whatever they call it. And I think that was too much of a learning curve and too jarring for a lot of Windows users, which is why Windows 8 I think did not have very good sales at first, and people just ran out and bought Windows 7 before it went away. Um, it's gotten better. Windows 8.1, that you can tell that they've listened and they're are trying to get Windows back to where it was before. I think Apple, if they do that integration, it'll be much smoother just because that company is just all about making it easy and integrated and nice and not having to scale a giant learning curve. But and I can see them maybe doing a to your point about wanting to touch the screen. Well, maybe we're going to see some kind of hybrid laptop where the top's an iPad and you've got an Apple branded keyboard, hinge there that you can just snap it in. And because Microsoft's already doing that with some of their tablets too, they've got sort of the detachable keyboard. So maybe they do that, but make it really elegant and easy to use and very lightweight. The TV stuff, I think they are doing a lot on, even though we've been talking about ITV for 2 or 3 years now. I think with all of the movement in voice activated stuff, I think they're going to probably integrate a lot of that into whatever TV product they do or whatever entertainment thing. They keep saying now the battle's through the living room. We see the game consoles like the PS4 and the Xbox One, being able to do movies and games and browse the internet and all that. Everyone wants the living room now that they've conquered the office. So for Apple to do like a really nice, maybe voice activated TV that integrates very tightly with all of your iOS life and your iCloud, and maybe you get you can already use a Bluetooth keyboard now with the current Apple TV, but maybe they hook that into whatever new TV product they want to do, and all of a sudden you've got a giant computer that you can work with a wireless keyboard right from your couch. So I have all kinds of ideas of what they might do, but it's a company that just kind of they always surprise you with something. Sometimes it's a wonderful surprise. Sometimes it's like, really, that's what you guys came up with. But most of the time they tend to be the good surprise kind. So I look forward to seeing what they're doing. I think it's probably going to be more TV because I think you're right. I think they threw a head fake on the whole watch thing. So Google, Microsoft, Samsung, and everyone else would go blow R&D money on making these things that are sort of a nice concept but don't really work well in real life. And I was talking to I do a podcast called Pop Tech Jam with my partner, and we were talking about. When's the last time you wore a watch? Everyone just looks at their phone now for when they want to tell the time. And
Exactly.
else, yeah. So the fact that they're trying to bring this thing that you wear on your wrist and have to consciously remember to put on every morning back seemed kind of regressive to us. But who knows? But I'm hoping for a big glorious TV that I can talk to and show me Elementary and it'll bring up the show. And then we go.
I think you and my daughter would get along very well. You've made your Doctor Who reference, your elementary reference. Do you want to?
Yeah,
I understand the new Sherlock premieres January 21st, I think.
19th,
19th, is it?
19th, I
Okay.
believe. Yeah.
Yes, my wife warned me this morning not to schedule anything that evening.
Hi,
Um,
Stacey. Clear the schedule.
yeah. um, so the last thing I want to mention, if someone, I mentioned that this is the sixth edition of the book. So if I buy the sixth edition of the book, and then in 6 months you have to do a seventh edition, do I have to worry that I need to go out and buy the seventh edition, or is there a way to subscribe to updates, or how does that work?
Well, with if you buy the book from O'Reilly's website, if you go to O'Reilly.com, you get free updates for all the reprints that we'll do. I believe you have to buy the separate editions,
Ah,
but a lot of times we will go back to press for reprinting to slide in new material that Apple has maybe like recently they just changed the way iBooks looks. It went from the sort of old skeuomorphic wooden bookshelves look to the new flat design with the frosty stripe shelves, as I think one reviewer called them. And so we were coming up for a reprint, and I'm like, well, I got to put on all these new screenshots, and they actually changed the way that you get to your books in a couple of places. So I updated the text, put in new art. The book went back to press, still under the same edition, but anyone who bought it from O'Reilly and signed up for the ebook got an automatic free update with new material. So we will do that within reprints. I think in the seventh edition, that counts as a whole new book, but anytime we update or make corrections or add any kind of new material in the current existing edition, if you bought from O'Reilly, and you can also get a print and ebook combo for a affordable price, then you will get the updates in.
very good. All right. Well, folks, listen, you can find the sixth edition of writer J.D. Biersdorfer's iPad, The Missing Manual in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. If you're watching the show on MrMedia.com, chances are right below the video, probably to the left, maybe to the right, You'll see the cover of the book. You can click on it right now. It'll take you to Amazon. You can have the book. You can download it within seconds to your Kindle or other device, or you can have it delivered to you within a day, 2 days, or maybe if by the time you're watching this, Jeff Bezos has started his drone program, you could have it in 30 minutes.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, do you have a website of your own?
I don't. I have a page on the O'Reilly site, so if
Okay.
you just search for me on O'Reilly.com, I blog at poptechjam.com, and I'm in the New York Times every week answering computer questions. So if you go to nytimes.com and just hit up the personal tech section, I'm usually writing something there every week.
All right. Twitter, Facebook, any of that kind of stuff?
JD Biersdorfer, all one word at Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook under JD Biersdorfer as well.
Very good. And you also mentioned, I didn't know about this before we started, you mentioned that you do a podcast. You want to give the name of that again and where people can find that?
Oh yeah, the name of the podcast I do with Pedro Rafael Rosado. We do a weekly show. It's called Pop Tech Jam, and the website is poptechjam.com. And every week we talk about what's new in the technology world. We try to offer maybe some service pieces, helpful hints, tips, that sort of thing. Do some audio gear reviews, and it's pretty loose. And then we also talk about the intersection of technology and geek culture. So we talk about a lot about Doctor Who there as well. So it's sort of a big nerdy show, but we're on hiatus for the next 2 weeks, but we'll be back in January. And again, that's at poptechjam.com.
You sound like you need to do what we did over the summer and go to Cardiff, Wales and do the Doctor Who experience. And
I really, really want to. There's a Doctor Who bar out in Brooklyn that I think has a TARDIS in the corner, so I'm going to at least try to get that far, and then perhaps plan a Cardiff trip for the fall.
well, if you go, you gotta check ahead. When we went, they had just for like 6 weeks opened up the studio, and you were actually able to walk around the actual TARDIS that they shoot
Ooh,
on. So if you go, try to time it around that because the Doctor Who experience was a little it wasn't the best, but the experience of actually being on the set of the TARDIS worth every
yeah,
penny. That was
that's
cool.
a lifetime memory there, Bob.
That was, and I'm not a big Doctor Who person, but even I thought that was cool. So
Yeah,
I will end with that.
thanks for the tip.
Of course, JD Biersdorfer, thank you so much for joining us today on Mr. Media.
Thank you for having me.